What is the IT strategy for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO? How is it using technology and innovation to change the way it does business? I'll explore these questions and so much more with our very special guest, Jamie Holcombe, Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. When you're architecting such an office with such an important mission, what are your specific duties and responsibilities, Jamie, as CIO?
Well, it goes down to a strategic philosophy. As the CIO, you have the obligation to set the vision and then show a roadmap about how to get there. But as in everything, that duty and mission has a lot to do with the culture. So you have to apply the right tools to the right people. The three things in business: people, process, and tools. All of them are necessary to make sure that a mission is successful, that a mission is accomplished. So what we need to do is take those tools and give them to the patents and trademarks teams so they're more efficient, they're better, faster, and cheaper in the execution of that mission. And so that's really inculcating the mission structure into the tool providing for the organization. We're a support organization. If you can't tell me in your IT position what you're doing to accomplish that mission, and it is awarding patents and or registering trademarks, that's it. If you can't relate about how your job, how your physical duties every day are around that mission, then you have to really question what you're doing and why you're doing it.
You mentioned your three priorities, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about them.
Sure, yeah. Number one, cybersecurity. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you think you're secure, watch out. And it does start with the basics. It's just like when you walk out of your home, do you lock your doors? Do you make sure the home is secure? We have to start with the basics before you can get into all the high-speed cyber, high tech, all these things that people seem to be overwhelmed about. And it's not. It starts with the basics. Just be secure. Lock your doors. In other words, have multi-factor authentication in order to get into your systems. Don't allow passwords to be shared. Don't give people access. Don't press on the links that somebody says, hey, you can get $100,000. Just press this link. It's really the basics. So you start on the inside, and of course you have to be protected from the outside. And so one of the big things about cyber having client-server realm, and we're moving to the modernization, bringing in the internet age, when we do our modernization, we have the ability to actually design in security at the beginning. And there's a lot of work being done right now on zero trust. Zero trust, and just like security, it's not a tool. It's not a thing. It is a philosophy. It is a way of thinking. The old client-server way and defense in depth is not a bad way, and in fact is a very good way to do work. There are a couple of weaknesses of defending in depth, and the system administrator named Snowden showed that to the NSA. In other words, even though he was given permission to get through over the moat, through the bridge, into the castle, and then inside to the Knights of the Round Table, where only the knights are allowed, right? That system administrator was allowed. Well, he shouldn't have been allowed to the Knights of the Round Table, because from there he could get anywhere he wanted and move laterally throughout the castle. We need to have a design theory of zero trust, where we don't allow these people where they don't need to be. So that's a really hard way to say. There's a difficult way between assuming that everybody's okay and then challenging everybody. And they might not even know you're challenging them in the sessions because they have certain tokens and they have a certain risk profile that we're providing them. And then when you challenge that risk profile after it gets over a certain score, then if it even goes into a further risky profile, you can kick them out and have them re-authenticate. And so because of that, the zero trust environment is a design thinking. And that's the number one cybersecurity thing we're trying to get into, is a different way to think. I could talk forever about insider threat, because it's not so much that we're worried about spies and, guys really selling all our secrets, but we're worried about simple neglect of leaving your doors open on your car with your keys right on the dash. That's what we're trying to prevent with insider threat. People might not even know that they're insecure or that they have things open. We have to educate our internal employees. Yes, we have to trust them, but we also have to look at their patterns and how they're behaving. If they normally do work in the afternoon, because we're all remote now, right? Say some patent examiner doesn't like waking up early in the morning. He gets up at 10 and his pattern is to work from 11 to 8. And then all of a sudden, after months and months, we see a pattern where all of a sudden he's up at 6 a.m. Well, is it him? Should we think about that? Should we look at that behavioral analysis and say, wait a second, let's challenge that session to make sure that that's him? Those are the types of design scenarios we really need to think about in the future of modernizing our IT infrastructure for security.
Jamie, IT modernization has been a key priority for some time within federal agencies. I'd like to explore your efforts at modernizing infrastructure and systems. Specifically, would you tell us more about your cloud migration efforts? What are the benefits and some of the key challenges to moving to the cloud?
Yes. We have a great way of understanding whether or not an application can be moved from our current client server into the cloud and how much refactoring it's really required. We've gotten a good process down where we're actually figuring out if we have green, yellow, or red in our scoring of that ability. Some of our old client server score red, because it's very difficult and it would almost require a whole redesign. So we'll keep that in our old data center. But if you have a yellow or green score, it means that there's an ability to refactor at such a pace that you can really get out to the cloud. The green, you might be able to get out to the cloud right away with minor changes. The yellow takes some changes. And so we've scored all these and we've asked all of our 30 different product teams to look at their applications and get the score this year. For those that are green, we'd like to move them to the cloud as soon as possible. And we're trying to be cloud agnostic in order to get the better, cheaper, and faster. And so on the cheaper and faster part, we have to make sure that it makes business sense to go out into the cloud. Sometimes our applications are so either process intensive and or storage intensive that the chattiness of going back and forth over the internet might actually be more expensive out in the cloud than it would be to hold in our data center and do it as we currently are doing it. You have to make that determination application by application. And we're doing that in a business case analysis of all of our applications. So the cloud has a lot of promise, but it's not a panacea. You need to ensure that you're looking at it from a very cold and stark business case, financial and functional analysis.
Jamie, I'd like to focus on USPTO's trademark and patent registration process. Each process consists of systems and applications supporting every step in the trademark and patent process: application submission, attorney review, registration, and continued use. Would you elaborate on efforts to improve the agency's technology for reviewing and approving trademark applications?
Of course, that's my job. You've just outlined exactly why I took the role, because it's all about providing tools to the examiners that are better, cheaper, and faster, right? But they're also modern. The search tool is one example of something that's really old, and we recently replaced it with something very new. And the old tool, in order to search for patents, can you imagine that a patent examiner has to sign their name and certify that this idea that's being presented is so novel and unique? It doesn't have to work. It just has to be novel and unique, such that nobody has ever thought of it ever in the world before this time. How do you do that? And so they were searching in the old way through Boolean parsing of words and abstracts of almost all types of documents, both inside what we consider our prior art reference to outside, and using bot crawls to figure out throughout the world if this thing has not been thought of before. So what we did was, instead of parsing individual words and creating these huge search algorithms, we've actually used machine learning, specifically TensorFlow and Python, to create new algorithms, which are neural network feedback loops of different examiners, to the point where they can search and find haystacks of categories. So instead of searching on individual words, now we're searching on concepts. And those concepts are the haystacks. And hopefully the patent examiner can find that needle in the haystack or that concept. And they can search many concepts to the point where they have all these different haystacks. You can create 100,000, whatever you need, these different haystacks, and then go searching through these haystacks. And based on that feedback loop of whether or not the results are coming in relatively better or worse, the examiner can use that search tool and figure out how to get to the actual prior art that would defeat or would reject or award the patent. So it's a great time to be part of this new ways of working and how we're actually looking at the workflow. And search is just one of the larger, but one of the tools that we're using. We do classification using machine learning. Well, we're doing a lot of things to augment the examiner, not replace the examiner. So a lot of people think that artificial intelligence will just take over the world and we just have to push a button. Those are the worst types of automation, because an algorithm left by itself without a human trying to guide it and coach it and teach it is not going to be as effective or precise as a man in the loop. Someone's actually putting some reasonable human rationale into the way that you get these results through these algorithms.
That's wonderful. You mentioned earlier, emerging technologies, robotic process automation. I was wondering if you could spend a little time telling us about how your office is using RPA and bots to enhance or change the way business gets done and the workflow at Patent and Trade.
I would love to address that, because emerging technologies there's a definition for it. And we just hired somebody, a great person named Jerry Ma, and he is our current emerging technologies director. And he's a very young man from Facebook. And the reason we hired him is because of his phenomenal approach and philosophy and strategy and his vision for emerging technologies, insofar as the definition means, hey, it's immature. The reason it's emerging is because it's brand new and it hasn't been proven yet. So do you really want to put your crown jewels into something that you don't know if it works or not? There needs to be proof of concepts. There needs to be pilots where you get verifiable results. You need to understand what the pros and cons of this RPA, this blockchain, this AI and ML work. In order to do that, then, it goes back to those pilots that I talked about with 30, 60, and 90. If you don't get results at the end of 90 days, then you have to starve that failure. You only feed success. And then once you get the success at the end of it, you figure out how to adapt. And then you can create the business case on which you actually invest or you don't. But when people say, how do you merge the emerging technologies into the line? Well, it's much like, how do you take R&D and make it O&M? How do you take research and development, make it operations and maintenance? The fact of the matter is, those two worlds don't mesh very well, because operations and maintenance are all about efficiencies and making things work. Research and development is all about the possibilities. So that intersection, or that bridge, in order to go from R&D to the O&M world, is the pilot, is the results, is the measurements for better, faster, and cheaper. And I don't think the government does a great job in research and development at all, because they expect success all the time. And in research and development, you have to expect failure. And in fact, you have to fund failure in order to know what not to do next. And see, when you have such tight budgets, the first thing that's going to be defunded is going to be your R&D. And that's probably the worst thing you could do. I'm not saying you could have an unlimited R&D budget, but you do need to have a good portion budgeted for R&D so that you can fail but succeed in the long run.
You obviously are passionate about the work you've done. You've achieved a lot in your time at PTO, and you've gotten the recognition. Most recently, the Washington Government Executive of the Year Award. Yeah, I was wondering, what does that recognition mean to you, and more importantly, what advice, given that recognition, that achievement, would you have for someone who is thinking about a career in public service?
That's a great one. I've been asked that personally amongst my LinkedIn network a lot. The fact of the matter is, it's not about the recognition, it's about the team. And so anything that you receive as a leader is because the team has earned it. And if you don't realize that, you don't belong in the position. So the team is the one that produces these awards, and you need to give recognition to the team for getting it done. They need to have your gratitude for what they've done for you. And then to realize that, one, it's not about you. It's about servant leadership. It's about making sure things happen for the team. Your job, it might be to set the mission and have this great idea and everything else. But guess what? It's all about you getting the resources to make your people successful, period. It has nothing to do with you. So that's the biggest thing. In order to be successful, you realize it's not you, it's about the team. And so that's the biggest piece of advice I can give anyone.
This has been the Business of Government Hour, a conversation with Jamie Holcombe, Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Subscribe, download, and listen to the entire interview at Podcast One, iTunes, or on your favorite podcast app. And as always at businessofgovernment.org.